Lincoln Tyner, welcome.
Good evening, Peter.
How are you? Our guest tonight is Sturt champion of the golden era of that fine club, Brenton Adcock. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming in on a cold night, Brenton.
It's okay.
Now, we've discovered your family was AC and CT Adcock, the real estate agents.
They were the original agents down in Croydon.
Yes.
And then the AC,
Yes.
my grandfather, moved to the eastern side of town where it was all paddocks. In Toorak Gardens was mainly paddocks, and started a real estate business there because the Depression was on and there was no work for two brothers, so they went their own way, and then their families joined them and they became separate businesses. But we always refer to them as our other office.
A very respectable real estate agency it was too.
We would have liked to think so.
Yes, and you started off in that, did you?
Well, I'm a fourth, fifth generation, whatever.
Sure.
And yes, when I was young, which is a long time ago, I joined the family business and was in it for 20 years until I went and did other things.
You don't mind me saying 71.
Yes.
And you look fantastic.
You look fit enough to go out and get a kick still.
You
He's very fit.
It's amazing, Brenton.
The top half, which is all you're seeing, is not bad. But the bottom half is a little rusty.
How do you keep fit?
Well, I've just come from my osteopath. He's just given me a couple of crunches. Say hello to him. He's a good guy. But no, I keep fit because I'm a farmer. I'm out in the paddocks. I'm doing things. I'm out in the fresh air.
It's a beef cattle.
Well, there's a few things. We've had a cattle stud for 30, 40 years. We grow apples. We grow lemons, which is unusual for the Adelaide Hills. And we have some cottages on the property.
Do you pee on all the lemon trees?
No, we haven't. We do fertilise them, but we don't necessarily. We haven't really got time to go out there and do it. 1,500 trees take a bit too long.
Yeah, they wouldn't. This is up in the Adelaide Hills.
It is, yes.
It's cold up there tonight.
It is very cool. It's cool down here, though.
Lincoln, shoot.
Well, I think that for our listeners that are unaware of Brenton's stellar career, it reads as well as a career could go. His first year in 1962 coincided with the arrival at Jack Oatey at Sturt. 259 games from 1962 to 74, 6 premierships, 20 appearances for South Australia, and All-Australian Blazer. So you can't do 3 carnival appearances, so you can't do much better than that. I'd really be interested to know from Brenton what it was like starting your career with this legendary Jack Oatey coming to Sturt. They were bottom, and he built them up into a powerhouse, and you were there for the whole journey.
Yes, I was, and probably the only reason that I ever got a gig at Sturt was because Jack had 1 year off from coaching over a period of 30 years or whatever, 20 odd with Sturt, and that 1 year he had off after coaching West Adelaide before coming to Sturt, he came and watched my school team.
PAC?
No, it was actually King's College or Pembroke now.
That's close.
And his son, Peter, was in the same football team as myself. I was the big guy, I was the 18-year-old captain of the team, and Peter who's about 3 or 4 years younger than I am. He's my little rover. And Jack would come along, and of course, if you're the biggest guy in the team and you've got a little bit of talent, you look better than you really are. And Jack would have seen that, and suddenly he's out at Sturt. And I happen to be in the Sturt district, even though I'm a Norwood supporter who, had this terrible dislike of Port Adelaide people.
Well, you got over that, though.
Well, I did. Yeah, I found out that they weren't bad after all.
No, that's right. Well, there was that great rivalry, crosstown rivalry, wasn't there?
There was, yes.
So, was he paternal, Oatey?
He was, very much so. He was very interested in everything we were doing. The football came second. I mean, he was there to win footy matches, and that's what he loved doing. But if you had studies, if you were at university, you had a job. If I rang up and said, "Look, I'm sorry, I've got a meeting tonight. I just can't get to footy training." Didn't happen very often because we all loved getting out there. We couldn't wait to get to footy training. Most nights, Jack would say, when we want to get a few more kicks, he'd say, "That's it, boys. You're in. There's no more tonight." That's
a very decent man, Jack Oatey.
A very decent man, and he was a real football psychologist. He knew
before the days that became a science. Obviously, Jack was, and I've sort of and I asked Brenton this. I reckon if Jack was a racehorse trainer, he'd have been a bit of a Bart Cummings. He'd have won Melbourne Cups, because I'm interested to know what it was about Jack that he always seemed to have those Sturt sides cherry ripe come September. What do you reckon was the key to that?
Yeah, well, Jack had that ability to instill in us that we're actually good players. Now, I'm just an ordinary player that played reasonably well, but he could make me feel like I was fantastic. And, training before big matches, we'd be on the track and running around doing our stuff. And if you dropped a ball or you mishandled something, you'd expect the coach to say, get your body behind the ball or get your hands behind it, or something like that. No, Jack would never. He never saw those. He saw every one of them. But he'd pretend he didn't see them until 2 seconds later you pick a ball up at your toes like, beautifully done. And then he'd race up behind you and whisper, all right, Adcock, you're in fantastic condition. You are beautiful. You are just coming to... we've got a grand final the next week. I mean, he just could convince you were invincible.
But did he ever lose it? Was he ever cross?
Oh, yeah. Apparently, I've never been on the bench. I've never sat on the bench, fortunately. And I've heard stories about benches and how coaches behave in those sort of situations. But in front of the players, if Jack even swore, he would slap his hand on the back of his hand and say, Jack, there's no need to speak in front of the boys like that.
It was that generation too, wasn't it?
Probably, yeah.
But different to Foss. Foss had a bit more
how did you find it? When you started playing for South Australia, you had Foss as the coach, and how did you find his style and his aggression and compared to Jack?
Look, they're totally different. But Foss, the very first time I was in a state team, Foss came up to me before the game and sat down quietly with me and said, look, Brenton, I know the way you do it out there at Sturt, and that's not my way I do it. When you're in the state team, this is the way we do it, and I hope you appreciate that. And I said, yeah, no problems. So yes, there was a lot more. There was no rant and rave with Jack. If Jack raised his voice, you would know something was pretty serious, and it would only be a matter of why you're going there instead of there. And Jack would never criticise anyone if they had a motive. He was a motive man. So if Jack said to you at half-time, Brenton, why did you handball that ball over your head straight to the opposition? And if I said, look, I heard a voice and I thought it was ours and I just did it reflex, he'd say, no problems, no problems. But if I had said, I got no idea why I did it, I'd be off the ground. It wouldn't go down at all well. Motive. He always wanted to know if there's a motive there, no problems. If it didn't work, that's just, sometimes that happens.
Now, some people subscribe to the theory that you have to lose a grand final and know what that feels like before you can appreciate winning one. Now, that's kind of what happened with Sturt in 1965. It's a remarkable grand final. It's still the record Adelaide Oval crowd, 62,543. Sturt
Which will never be beaten.
35 points down early in the last quarter and then unleashed this scintillating brand of football and drew within 3 points. And you had a part to play in this remarkable closing minutes where Halbert, Hicks and Adcock all had shots for goal and miss. Can you remember, what was the back pocket player doing up in the forward lines, and how did 3 champion players miss shots for goal, all of which could have won the game?
Well, 2 of those players mentioned, of course, were forwards and shouldn't miss. The other one did miss on 2 occasions without scoring even a point. And I was there because the Rovers that I was standing, or the on-ballers, were stuffing up our forward line, and so I was told to just get a kick behind the play. So if they went into the full forward line, I was at half forward, just putting on the brakes for anything that came out. So I got a couple of chances, and it's amazing. You can speak to any Sturt supporter, old Sturt supporter, and they've got to be old to remember back this far. The thing they'll remember most about my career, remember 1960, whatever.
Was there a feeling, the disappointment after the game in the rooms, did you still feel like you were on the verge of something big, or did you feel like it was a one-off chance you'd blown because you didn't know what was ahead of you?
No, you never know what's ahead of you, but you're absolutely right. I can remember as clear as anything, probably the clearest meeting I've ever been at was the night, probably 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning. We're all upstairs in the club rooms at Unley, and we're all, sort of commiserating and what have you. But the feeling was, this is not the end. This is just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We have arrived. The club has arrived.
Yeah,
of course, we'd had some bad years previous to that. So, and it was absolutely right.
And 12 months later, I think it was the biggest loss Port had in a grand final to that stage. You doubled their score. And can you remember the difference in the feeling in that match compared to the previous year? Because what's it feel like when you're running around in a grand final and you think, hey, we actually know we're going to win this? It's not one of those heartbreak siren and as a...
Yep. Well, doesn't matter how many goals you're up, you want to get another goal up. And we learnt that from Port Adelaide. I can remember one of the very first games I ever played on the Kensington Oval when they used to play matches there. And I was somewhere around the centre, and there is Motley and Cale and all these guys, and they're winning by about 16 goals. And they're just drumming in, let's get another one, let's get another one. And I'm thinking, boy, just can't you let up, we're no. And I remember that. Every time I played Port Adelaide, I'm thinking, if we're up by 10 goals, I want 11. I want to see 12.
Yeah.
So, you learn. You learn as you go.
Relentless style, yes, yeah.
And then moving into state football, you had a remarkable career. Like, in that era, South Australia didn't beat Victoria very often, and one of your first state games, you were in a win in 1965. And do you remember much about that game? And
I do. I remember that I'd only been in the state squad, unlike some of the other guys, for a few weeks training, and suddenly my name is, on Monday morning I go out to a training session, and on Saturday I'm playing for the state. I was so wet between the ears that at the end of the game I found my wife and went home. I didn't know there was an after-match presentation, and I happened to win a trophy for the best player in the eyes of the Victorian people. So it had to be delivered to me the next morning. But I do remember. In the first few minutes of that game, a ball came down towards the half-back line somewhere, and I ran up and I jumped in. I thought, I'm under this. This is going over my head. This is not a good start. And I stuck my hands in the air, and the ball stuck. And I came down with this absolute screamer for a little guy, and I'm thinking, how did that happen? And you just that confidence, and then of course that's all you need is a little bit of confidence to go for it, and you're in business.
Well, the following year you were selected in 3 carnival sides in Hobart 66, Adelaide 69 and Perth 72, but in 1966 you won an All-Australian blazer. What do you remember of, like in those days you would have had 2 weeks off work in Hobart or Perth or wherever. What do you remember about that particular, your first carnival, and then, suddenly being named in the All-Australian side at the end of the carnival must have been a...
Well, the thing I remember most was the trouble we got into, because we're staying in the same hotel as the Victorians, and we'd heard that they had this stuff called Sustagen that they would take. It's a supplement. So we found this great big tin of it down in the kitchen somewhere, and we've hidden it. And we got into a lot of trouble. The Victorians weren't very happy about that. They got it back because there was a lot of pressure brought to bear. But the other thing I remember about that particular carnival was it was freezing. I mean, it can get pretty cold down there. Sure. It was the North Hobart ground, and if you're playing in the early match, like there's 2 matches, and so if you're in the early match, the fog sometimes hasn't lifted.
Good
and
Lord.
I can remember running around thinking, I think it's coming around that flank there. And it was so cold that when you took a mark, you normally can feel the ball in your hands, but because your fingers are gone, so you have to look and say, yeah, I've actually got this thing. I have taken the mark. The good part about my feet was that I had this thing about getting cramp. And somebody said, you put, what is it, something in your boots.
Camphor?
Or something like that. It's as hot as. Oh, yeah. And my feet, I had blisters on my feet. I'd burnt the bottom of soles with this stuff. But,
Brenton Adcock, our guest, a Sturt champion, Lincoln Tyner here on our football segment 891. Lincoln.
What, in those, being 2 weeks away on one of those carnivals, what did they do in between the days when you weren't playing matches? Did they train, or did you...
Were you entertained?
Entertained, or what did you do for 2 weeks?
Well, I shouldn't admit to this, but probably 50 years after the event you can, but My parents actually decided they would go to this carnival,
wow.
And they picked up my wife and brought her to the carnival. Now we're all staying in a city hotel.
Yeah.
So I could sneak away a little and and see my wife, which was lovely. But I can't even remember what we did in the meantime. But I don't think it was over 2 weeks. It was probably only 2 weekends and the weekdays in between, I have a feeling. But
the following one, though, was in Adelaide, which is rare to be able to play in a home carnival. Was that a bit different? You just had a normal...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing better than going away with a group of guys who are committed to try and win a football match. When you play at home, well, you just turn up like a normal game and do your thing, and there are a few extra things involved, of course, but there is not that same feeling when it's home than when it's away. But, of course, it's theoretically should be easy to win at home.
And do you still see some of those people you played with, Halbert and Bagshaw, all those people?
Yep. There was actually a reunion on last weekend, at Unley Oval for the 74, which was my last game of football, and the first grand final
at Footy Park.
Park,
Of course.
which we won. And so, obviously caught up with the guys there. But I do see John... Baggy has a group down on Good Friday every year to his home, and he puts on a barbie, and he gets his sax out and plays a few tunes, and it's all good. And I play golf. Baggy's a golfer, I'm a golfer, and other fellows like Tony Bergen and Sandy Nelson. Yeah, I see them. We don't live in each other's pockets, and quite frankly, most of us, Sandy's involved in the club, but Baggy, myself, John is, we hardly get to a game. I mean, personally, I'd probably rather, if there was a choice between a game of golf and going to a footy match, I probably would go to the golf. I hate to admit it here on a football show.
You probably brought up another interesting point that most of you, although being A-grade footballers in the summer, you were a Linton Cup tennis player. John Halbert was a district cricketer.
Yeah.
So you all played top-level summer sport, and so Jack wasn't apparently strong on pre-season because he believed if you were continually playing sport, you were fit. All you needed to do was get the skills up in time for round one.
Yes, absolutely. And I can remember turning up to the first game probably well into my career, and Jack really looked after his older players. He would... you don't have to train tonight if you feel like you don't want to. But there have been occasions when I would turn up for the first game with maybe 2 weeks training. 2 weeks, just turn up, because I'd been playing tennis, and I would have been playing tennis with Jack's two sons, Peter and Bob, who were both excellent tennis players. So we'd be running around the drive doing our thing.
And why farming, Brenton Adcock? Why did you go into that?
Well, the school I went to had a boarding house, excuse me, and the boarding house guys were all, as a boys' school, and they were all farmers' sons. So I went to their farms for school holidays. They just became my best mates.
Sure.
And so I would chase rabbits and ride horses, and I thought, boy, this farming, it's a great profession to be in. I wasn't thinking about making any money. I'm just having fun chasing rabbits. So I always wanted to be a farmer, and I love doing things with my hands. I like a bit of sweat on the brow and that sort of stuff. So that in the back of my mind. But my father, bless his soul, he had a real estate business and not a farm. The farm would have made it easy, but the real estate was good too, because he had a very good business, and I was playing football and was well known, so I was successful with my brothers in the real estate business.
Yep.
But this little nagging thing, I want to be a farmer, and then at probably about 30, if that, probably in the late 20s, I found this little piece of paradise, you see. And I'd read about it in books where you want to buy the farm with the creek and the willows and the picnic spot there and the romantic, you could see the rug out and all that sort of stuff. None of which makes any money. But eventually we did buy a piece of land, and we've bought bits and pieces from neighbours and so on, and got together a farm. But then eventually, so now I've got the farm and I've also got a real estate business, and there comes a time when you're either, if you're going to do anything, you've got to do it properly. So am I going to be the farmer and the poor farmer, or am I going to stay in the real estate and hopefully do well? So I decided to follow my dreams, and my wife was really keen to do likewise, and money doesn't interest her very much. So we went farming. As it turned out, we've done quite well. So it's
Must have been a big learning curve.
It was a big learning curve, but if you're keen, you can learn anything pretty quick.
And you've enjoyed it.
I have. Oh, I love it. I love it. Yeah. No.
And you've got old cottages on the property that you did up that are run as guest houses. Did you do a lot of that renovation work yourself? Are you that sort of skilled as well?
Absolutely. Well, my wife, Gay, she was an interior decorator, so she's pretty clever at those sorts of things. And so the first cottage was Apple Tree Cottage, which was built in the 1860s, and two-storey, quaint cottage that looks like an English cottage, which English people built it. So, but when this piece of land came up next door, I rang the agent and said, look, what's the story? You can have a look inside the cottage. And he said, Brenton, it's not worth anything, so don't worry, no point in looking through. I said, oh, fair enough, bought it. Then after I'd settled it, went down to have a look, see what I'd got. Well, sure, the bathroom had fallen off and a few things like that, but the basic structure was sound. So started renovating, and as a holiday home for the family, mum and dad come up and stay on the farm, and then suddenly they don't come up as often as you'd like, and you think, hey, we might make some money out of this. So one thing led to another, and you need a title for every house you build up in the hills. So eventually we had enough land to either buy a house property that could convert, or build a cottage that looks old, like Gumtree Cottage looks like it's been there for yonks, and Lavender Fields looks like a nice stone cottage somewhere in France.
And you're improving the hills.
And we're improving the hills. Yes, absolutely.
Now, I should go back to one footy question before we jumped into farming. You played in grand finals and premierships on Adelaide Oval, and you had the honour of being in the first premiership at Football Park. Can you give any comparison of the two? You only had the one season at Footy Park before you retired, but it was 74 was the big year, the first one at Footy Park, and you were the first premiers there. What are your memories of the premierships on both ovals?
Well, I loved Adelaide Oval for a couple of reasons. One, it was closer to home, because we lived at Kensington Gardens. But Footy Park was just, that was the thing that needed to happen at the time, and it was a totally different type of stadium. I only ever played one season there, probably only played a few games there in my whole life. Obviously, the last one counted pretty nicely. And Footy Park's been fantastic. But then you look at the Adelaide Oval now, and it is a very, very great asset to the state.
Brenton Adcock here. Time for the Swinburne tips.
Swinburne footy tips.
All systems ready.
Swinburne footy tips.
Well, gentlemen, tomorrow night, Carlton v North Melbourne at the Docklands. Computer says North Melbourne. Brenton?
Yeah, I'll go for North Melbourne.
Lincoln?
Yep, they've got too much hanging on their season, North Melbourne, to let this one slip.
Saturday at the Docklands, St Kilda v Fremantle. Computer says Fremantle. Lincoln?
Yep, far too strong Fremantle for me.
Brenton?
Yeah, yes, Fremantle will win that easily.
And then the Giants, Greater Western Sydney Giants versus the Geelong Cats. The Sydney Showgrounds. Computer says Geelong. Brenton?
You couldn't go past Geelong, I don't think, there.
They're still a great side, and they're still performing well, so I'll go them.
The Glorious Power in need of a win v Melbourne. Adelaide Oval, the Power, says the computer. Lincoln?
Just reminding Port supporters that the Crows should have beaten Melbourne at Adelaide Oval and didn't, so this now, given their performance against Richmond last week, this Melbourne game that they should win looms as a potential danger match.
Brenton?
Yes, no, I'll go for Port Adelaide, although I agree with everything Lincoln has said. You can't take that team too lightly.
And Western Bulldogs v Essendon in the split round at the Docklands on Sunday afternoon. Computer says Essendon. Brenton?
Yes, I'll go with Essendon too.
Yep, they're really flying at the moment, the Bombers, so I'll go Essendon.
There we are. Happy life, Brenton.
Thank you.
You've had a happy life.
No, I've had a very blessed life. It's been really good.
He looks fantastic.
I know.
Very chipper.
See, lots of premierships, it makes you a happy soul.
Very pleased to have you in, Brenton Adcock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lincoln Tyner, on ya. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.